Good morning to everybody. The next one, please. So, basically, I'm not, I have some doubt to be the best person to speak about privacy or privacy as a value. I'm a psychoanalyst, I'm an amateur philosopher, but I know that here there are a lot of professional philosophers, so I must declare that I'm just an amateur philosopher. And if, the next one please, if I can contribute in any way to this conversation is just by showing you a different perspective. I don't know if this perspective can be considered important or just marginal, probably just marginal, so I beg your pardon. But my goal is just to think together with you. The next, please. So let's start with the initial question, whether privacy is a Western value. Actually, this question includes two different questions. Whether privacy is a value and whether it is Western. The next, please. The term value has been used and is used in two different ways. It can be used as a verb or as a noun. In the tradition of Western philosophy, it has been used as a noun. Value is something which is inherent to things, which is objective, which is external to human beings. Next one, please. In modern philosophy, in the modern Western thought, let's go ahead using the term Western. We are using more and more value as a verb. It means that we are focusing on the human activity to give value to something. So value is not in things, but it is in humans. Next. One of the important consequences has been the fact that we are studying values from an empirical perspective, which was completely unthinkable in classic philosophy. If you told Aquinas or any scholastic philosopher to study facts about values, empirical research about values, he could look at you as a crazy person. On the contrary, we start exploring, investigating values as empirical fact. But it implies that values are actually conceptualized in terms of like or dislike. So the question, is privacy a Western value, could be rephrased: what different cultures like about privacy? Do Chinese, Indians, Africans, or whatever else like or dislike the same things we like and dislike concerning privacy? This would be the question. Next, please. If we do not agree with this way to frame the problem, all this discussion can be stopped here, because we enter in a different perspective, which is that privacy is an objective good, is something that is not due to our own perspective. Next. And this is not, to be clear, it is not a medieval perspective. On the contrary, many modern scholars believe that privacy is a universal value. Of course, very often they do not phrase this in terms of universal value, which look a bit too metaphysical. They prefer to use the expression cultural universal, which is just a gentle way to hide metaphysics somewhere else. But for instance, Alan Weston, one of the most influential scholars who studied privacy, thought that privacy was a universal value. Next, please. So, let's stop a moment. And I want now to ask you to change your mind, your perspective, and to enter in my consultation room, in my cabinet, with a patient. It's a young lady. This young lady was suffering from panic disorder. Once she told me that she was able to provoke to herself a panic attack. How she did? She started thinking of herself in a precise point, like in a chair or a armchair on a bed. Then she started to enlarge the chair is in the room is in the apartment is in the street, always with her in the point. Maybe someone of you is going to have a panic attack. If you have the genetic makeup, you could. So she still thinks of herself in one point, but the point is enlarging. The building, the street, the city, the country, the world and the solar system, the galaxy, I don't know, because she remembers some crazy picture in his book in the primary school or something like that. So something bigger, boom, panic attack, suddenly. Next. So, what is the problem? And I agree with Beat. Why the space metaphor is wrong, is misleading, speaking of privacy. And pay attention, I gave you these examples, this clinical example, because it has something to do with privacy. Because the panic attack started from a private area, from a private condition. But the space metaphor is misleading because space is, in its turn, a metaphor. Space does not exist. What exists for humans are places. Is not space, is an abstract concept. We do not experience space. We only experience place. What is the difference between place and space? Space is something invented by mathematicians. It's a useful concept, but has nothing to do with human experience. Place is an area of meanings. It's made by science. It's made by science, by meanings. Is not made by meters, by geometry. Next, please. So, and this is the same for the overall human environment. The human environment, society, is made up by symbols, by an intricate network web of meanings. Next, please. And all human beings, every human being, is born within this environment. And this is the reason why we are so complex, because we are not only determined by our genetic makeup or by our family history, but we are determined by the whole human history. What is astonishing in human beings and what makes human dignity, what makes invaluable each human being, is the fact that each one of us is the recapitalization, is the point of arrival of the entire human history. In you, in each one of you, there is the story and the history of millions of humans. It is in our biology, in our genes, but it is in our mind, in our symbols, in what we are. It is in our flesh and in our mind. This is what makes each human being so absolute. Please. So, we can go ahead, please. So, we should, when we analyze society and societal product, we should consider this dimension, this symbolic dimension. And this symbolic dimension is, can be conceptualized with the expression used by some psychoanalysts with the expression social unconscious, which is different from the symbolic structure which derives from your own past experience, which still exists, which is important, but it is only a small coin of the story. The whole story is the story of the humanity behind us. Next one. So, some symbolic elements are rooted in biological constitution, maybe in the sensory apparatus, the neurological structure. Others come from our individual experience. And in between the biology and the individual story, there is society. This is the huge system of social identities, social groups, social unconscious, and we belong to different groups, we belong to different, we don't have one identity, we have several overlapping identities, and each identity is made up by a whole symbolic system. Next, please. So, privacy has a normative dimension, and I don't want to enter in this. I repeat, there are people here who are definitely better than me to discuss the normative aspect of privacy. But if we consider privacy in a deeper sense, in the sense of deeper human sense, not in a deeper philosophical, a deeper human sense, the notion of privacy includes the three dimensions: biological, societal, individual. Please. Why? And I would like to start with the biological dimension. Why? Because if you want to search for a universal dimension of privacy, probably it makes sense to search it in our biological constitution. So what is in common, what we have in common as belonging to the same species. One of the initial point used to justify biological privacy was the concept, you know, of territory in animals, please. Some animals, most animals actually, have, most mammalians at least, and birds, have a territory which is called home range, which is the territory in which they explore and they control somehow. They don't want that other animals enter, or they control those who enter, etc. Some others have a particular attitude to defend this area, which is, usually there are two different areas. There is the home range, which is larger, and a more restricted area, which is the territory. Basically, the territory is the area in which I want to control access to prevent any damage, to prevent being attacked. The home range, on the contrary, is the area I want to protect because it's the area where I go to look for mating or food or something like that. Next one, please. Ethologists have studied extensively the experience of overcrowding in animals, and it is clear that if we oblige animals, mammalians and primates in particular, to live in an environment in which their territory or their home range is constantly invaded, they can't prevent intrusion, they become crazy, and they develop a series of psychological and physical disease. They can even die. So from a biological point of view, we belong to the genus of mammalians, but there is no reason to think that we are so different. We share with other animals these elements that beyond a certain threshold, we suffer from overcrowding, please. And actually there are a lot of studies about overcrowding in humans, which substantially confirm that overcrowding is pathological for humans as well. But what is interesting, that for humans is still more pathological isolation, which is not the same for most animals, including primates. Isolation is extremely dangerous for human beings. Basically, if you put a human in total isolation, in few days is going to develop hallucination. These experiments were carried out in the 50s. This is interesting for bioethics, because they were carried out in the 50s by the military labs in the US. Students were paid to remain in completely isolated environment till they developed some symptoms like hallucinations. These experiments were, they were paid $20 per day. But this is a good example how people could give up, not only privacy, but everything. And these experiments were denounced in the early 70s by Senator Bob Kennedy, and this was the beginning of the first bioethical commission in the US. Next, please. Was studies with hostage and etc., etc. Next. Extremely interesting, also in babies. Babies, abandoned, neglected babies, babies without, isolated babies, not only stop growing up, they can even die. Probably some sudden death in newborns can be explained in such a way. Next. And there is an horrible but extremely interesting experiment carried out in the Middle Age by Prince, but it was Prince, was the Emperor of the Roman, the Holy Empire, Frederick I, which decided, which was convinced that the original language of humanity was Hebrew, because Adam and Eve were Hebrew. So what he did, he secluded 40 babies, newborns, avoiding any human contact. They was given food, but they didn't meet any human being. Because he was sure that they were going to speak naturally and to speak Hebrew, because it was the original language. And the experiment was faithfully reported by a monk. I don't remember the name of the monk, but in any case it is not so important. Well, 40 babies all died. And they received care, food, anything, but human contacts, and they all died. Obviously, no one spoke Hebrew, they died before. So, what is the point? The point is that, biologically speaking, we are animals which need territory, which need seclusion, which need the possibility to stay separated by others, but we absolutely need contacts. And there is a tension, but it is a biological rooted in what we are. Next. So, a second case. This is an amazing case. I like it a lot. A case, again, of a young lady. This is a case extremely related to privacy, as you will see. Christine. Christine was suffering from anorexia. Next. Oh, she lived at home. She was aware to have some kind of eating disorders, but she didn't like to be diagnosed as anorexic. She didn't eat. Why she didn't eat? Because she felt sick. And she explained to me that the problem was that when she was about to eat, very unpleasant thoughts, ideas come to her mind. So she felt sick and she couldn't eat. As a psychoanalyst, I immediately thought that it's probably something related to sexual desires. Psychoanalysts are very obvious people. And Christine was very relaxed, told me, yes, of course, unpleasant people, unpleasant idea, unpleasant thoughts were concerning sexual scenes, sexual images. But I didn't agree to have these images while I was eating something. So, well, the previous one. So the problem started when she was 7, when she had the impression that parents can read her mind. She told me there was a very precise moment. She was at home, she was alone. The parents were outside. They returned home. They opened the door, and in that moment, she had the impression that they could read her mind. She didn't know how, but she was sure next. At the very beginning, she felt relaxed. She was a baby, 5, 6 years, because what she thought, I do not need to ask anything. They love me, they can read my mind, they will provide everything. So, perfect, like God. Huh? But, and remember what we described before about the dichotomy, the tension between isolation and the need to be secluded. At the very beginning, she was happy that her mind was open. But next, she started to develop a very unpleasant feeling. She had no privacy. We could conceptualize this. And then she invented, next, a system to protect herself. She started to develop a complex system, like a meditation, to make a sort of empty mind. When she was alone, she thought. But when she was in presence of someone else, in particular her parents, she stopped thinking. Try to stop thinking. It's impossible. You need to be a Zen master to try to do this. But she succeeded. At least she told me that she succeeded in stopping thinking. So, it was clear that what Christine repeated with anorexia was the same symptom she developed when she was a baby, a child. As when she was a child, he achieved an empty mind, now she is achieving an empty body. But it is always a problem of emptiness. But I was still wondering why. What was the problem behind this? Next. So, sexual thought, aggressive thought, which is the last card that usually psychoanalysts play. And when there is not sex, there is aggression. But the problem, and I understood this only some months later, the problem was another. She was right, and the problem is that very often psychoanalysts didn't listen at their patient. If you listen to people, you will understand them very clearly, because we are clear persons. Huh? The problem is in the eyes, in the receiver, not in the sender. The point was clear. Christine has nothing to hide. But in order to have an identity, to exist, we need to have something to hide. If you don't have nothing, anything to hide, you do not exist. And this is the foundational value of privacy. We exist, we all exist, because we have something to hide. If you don't have anything to hide, like Christine, you have to hide that you have nothing to hide. Christine was hiding her emptiness, was an emptiness full of emptiness, nothing else. Please. So, the cultural aspect of privacy concerns the way in which these problems can be shaped, framed by different cultures. But what I wanted to illustrate, not to demonstrate, was the fact that the concept of privacy is so nuanced, so rich, so complex, that posing the question whether it is a Western value is misleading, because we should first understand what privacy is. And this is the reason why it is very legitimate to discuss data protection in other cultures. How to deal, how to handle personal data, what is personal data, what is a sensible personal data, etc., 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 in different cultures. But if we enter in the realm of privacy, please be cautious, because we are at the core of our human identity. Next. And I want just to show you an example of cultural difference. Culture, you know, can be vertical or horizontal. I'm not able to speak of other diachronic culture. I'm not so expert of Chinese, Indian, African cultures to tell you about the way in which they frame the concept of privacy. But I can probably tell you something about a vertical culture, other culture in other period of our civilization, the Roman culture. This piece of stone, black stone, the lapis niger, should be taken as a symbol for privacy, because it is the first document concerning privacy. It is an inscription which declares a place sacred and threatens all those who enter with terrible punishment. What is a sacred place? Next. The sacred place is basically the private place of God. Privacy and sacred place are the same. They have the same origin. Even in etymological terms, both privatus and sacer means to cut away, separated. They have the same meaning etymologically. Please. The first secluded areas were the secluded areas devoted to the God or to the Lord. And this is still echoed in the castle law. And you see again, you could look at the space metaphor of privacy again, but it is completely different, because it concerns a spatial space, a spatial space, a place. which is a sacer, a sacrus, a holy place. Let's see how this can affect us. This was the past. No one of us can think of privacy in terms of holy space or holy place. Old civilization. Okay. This is Elias Canetti. You see, the first point, there is nothing that man fears more than the touch of the unknown. All the distances which men create around themselves are dictated by this fear. This is very somehow obvious. You can remember what we have just discussed about territoriality. But extremely interesting what Canetti says afterwards. If you don't have a secluded space, a holy space, a private space, a place in which to stay, how could you overcome the fear of the crowd? Go into the crowd. The only place in which humans don't feel any longer the fear of the crowd is when they are totally plunged into the crowds, when they become the crowd. Strange, but it is what happened. And this explains the privacy paradox. In our culture, we do not have any longer private places. We do not have any longer holy places. The social web is the crowd in which people enter to overcome the fear of the crowd. Next, please. So, I conclude. I repeat what I've just told you. Privacy is a foundational concept. And this is the reason we should handle it with a lot of care. Next. I repeat again to avoid any misunderstanding. Any discussion about the normative dimension of privacy is fully legitimate, and this is extremely important and definitely more important than the stupid things that I told you. But, said so, we need to govern data protection. We need to solve difficult political questions. But when the Center for Ethics of Tartu, which is a distinguished philosophic center of philosophers, invite us to discuss privacy, we could create a small place, a small private place, in which we open our discussion to other meanings, and in which we try to go, I don't know, beyond, but aside the normal, regular stream of the discussion on privacy. So this was at least what I tried to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful stories. And do we have one quick question, or do you, we still have an opportunity to, yeah, Beata, please. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. That was really very, very interesting. I do have two small questions, and maybe we can discuss them later on as well. when you were saying that we have very many different identities, but the basic need is to have something to hide, because that is what human existence makes, yeah? To have something which we want to hide, which I totally agree. Then my question is, what sort of anthropological idea do you have in the background? Do we have one central value of having something to hide and then different identities in different contexts, or do we have different things to hide? And that would be my approach, because I'm so hesitant about essentialism in identity theories. We need something to have to hide in all different contexts and roles. That's, yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that.
The answer is both. We have different identities because we do not have one identity. It is obvious, but in the sense that we are, at least we are. I suspect that we are, I think, I imagine that we are. We are the crossing point of several identities which are external to us. But we are the node. We are the point in which lines cross. But we are not substance. There is not a subject. Actually, Buddhism, philosophy, or religion is completely right. Psychologically speaking, there is no, but you don't need Buddha, it is enough Hume. Psychologically speaking, the subject does not exist. The subject is the crossing point of several other subjects. We are made up by the others. I don't know. Maybe we are all Christine. Maybe no one of us has anything to hide. This is the tragedy, I don't know. But we at least, mentally healthy person, believe to have something to hide. We do believe it. And this is our mental